WrestleMania 13, which took place in 1997, is the perfect microcosm of WWE's year as a whole. On one hand, you had a match considered by many to be the greatest in Mania history, more on that later, but later that same night, you had Undertaker vs Psycho Sid, a match so bad it made one of the competitors cack themselves. Allegedly, but also definitely. 97 sure was a topsy-turvy year for the Fed, but luckily we will only be focusing on the good stuff today, so you can put the toilet paper away. I'm Adam Pachisi from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 best WWE matches of 1997. Join us! Number 10, Cactus Jack vs Hunter Hurst Helmsley on Raw. About 2.5 years before their more famous feud, Paul Levesque and Mick Foley were still tearing each other's hair out. In the same year that Hunter Hurst Helmsley and one of the three faces of Foley fought in a steel cage at Summerslam, they met again on the September 22nd episode of Raw with Mick in his Cactus Jack persona, which he introduced with a very creative video package. This Falls Count Anywhere bout made full use of its stipulation, as Jack and Hunter definitely got their 10,000 steps in. The easy dub chants that the crowd showered these two with were thoroughly deserved, as unsuspecting viewers might have worried they had tuned into the Philly show by mistake. Spots such as Helmsley flying over the top rope to the floor and Foley getting bashed in the brains with a steel chair drew audible gasps, but the creme de la crazy occurred during the finish. Jack managed to counter a pedigree on the top of a table on the ramp and then hit a bloody pile driver to break it in half and score the pin. Absolutely nuts, this one. Number 9, Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold Steve Austin vs Owen Hart and the British Bulldog on Raw. In 1997, Stone Cold Steve Austin really couldn't stand the Hart Foundation. He found a kindred spirit in Shawn Michaels, whose beef with the Harts was reaching its peak, so the two decided to seal their friendship by going after the tag team titles. Ah, cute. In reality, HBK and the Texas Rattlesnake were not on good terms, which added a little extra spice to their title match with Owen Hart and the British Bulldog on the May 26th Raw. Owen and Davey had been champions for 8 months, so surely they would be able to overcome this dysfunctional unit, right? The match, which went around 13 minutes, was wild from beginning to end. The disdain the challengers had for the champions was on full display, as they laid into the title holders with full force. Austin had an incredible hot tag to close out the match, but only scored the pin thanks to Michaels super-kicking Bulldog behind his back. The Lone Star Statesman had done it, but this was far from over. An eclectic match with 4 great workers and thousands of screaming fans on side, this was one of the best Raw main events of the entire year. Number 8, Shawn Michaels vs Stone Cold Steve Austin at King of the Ring. You would think that being co-champions with someone would make you friends. You would be wrong. About a year before they met in the main event of WrestleMania, Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold gave everyone a sneak preview at the 1997 King of the Ring pay-per-view. This bout was set up to determine who the captain of the team was. How that would actually work, I have no idea, but look, it got us to this match, so don't complain. It didn't take long for all the tension between these unlikely allies to boil over, and by the end of the match, they were treating each other like the most hated of enemies. This was Austin and Michaels before the career-altering injuries they would sustain in the coming months, so the action was crisp, the pace was fast, and the transitions between moves were as smooth as freshly ironed butter. The only real knock against this captivating contest is that it didn't have a conclusive ending, as the two both got disqualified for beating up too many referees. Still, when it comes to matches without proper finishes, you could do far worse. Number 7, The Great Sasuke vs Taka Michinoku at In Your House 16 Canadian Stampede. Here's something weird I bet you totally forgot about. At In Your House 16, subtitled Canadian Stampede for reasons we will get to, Taka Michinoku, who had just signed with the Federation, and the Great Sasuke, who wasn't signed at all, put on a match the likes of which the company had rarely seen. These Japanese light heavyweights were miles ahead of anything American wrestlers were capable of at the time, and did not hold back when it came to showing off. Taka and Sasuke cut a lightning-quick pace that would have given most WWE performers at the time a heart attack just looking at it, as they traded moves that certainly weren't commonplace unless you were regularly watching the Cruiser Crew on Nitro. Sasuke got the win in a match that you would think propelled him to superstar status, but sadly, these two were so ahead of their time that the fans simply weren't interested. To paraphrase Marty McFly, they weren't ready, but their kids were gonna love it. So even if the plebs in the crowd didn't understand what they were watching, this was still an outstanding showcase of how varied wrestling can be from two performers who still don't get the love they deserve. Number 6, The Undertaker vs. Bret Hart at SummerSlam. I hope there were some astronomers in the crowd at SummerSlam 1997 because all the stars were out for the main event. Not only was defending world champion The Undertaker taking on Bret Hart, but their clash would be overseen by special guest referee Shawn Michaels, who sadly hadn't yet begun his tradition of wearing tiny shorts while officiating. Shawn's hatred for Bret was pretty strong by this point, but if he showed any sort of bias, then he would be banned from wrestling in the United States ever again. This made for quite the dramatic encounter, as the allegiance of the referee played just as big a part as the actions of the performers. Speaking of, let's not forget that this was the Dead Man vs. the Hitman, a marquee match that drew incredible interest and was almost guaranteed to be great bell to bell. In the end, HBK played a huge part in the finish, accidentally clocking Taker with a steel chair to inadvertently hand his hated rival the gold. That one misstep set in motion pretty much every major storyline for the rest of the year, so yeah, we pretty much had to put this one on the list. Number 5, Bret Hart vs. Stone Cold Steve Austin vs. The Undertaker vs. Vader at In Your House 13 Final 4. The main event of WrestleMania 13 was supposed to be Bret Hart getting his win back against world champion Shawn Michaels from the previous year. However, the showstopper famously dropped his smile down the back of the sofa, throwing these plans into complete disarray. A 4-way match between Hart, Steve Austin, The Undertaker and Vader would crown the new champion at In Your House 13, which was subtitled Final 4, but we all know it should have been called, unlucky for some. The Hitman, the Dead Man, the Masked Man and the Bald Man competed in a weird elimination match where you could go out via pinfall, submission or being thrown over the top rope. Bret took down Stone Cold to further their incredible rivalry, whilst Taker low-blowed Vader to chuck him out and reduce the body count down to 2. The courageous Canadian eventually overcame the bigger man after an Austin distraction, clotheslining him out of the ring to claim the top prize in a bout that was as needlessly convoluted as it was spectacular to watch. Number 4, the Hart Foundation vs. Stone Cold Steve Austin, Ken Shamrock, Goldust and the Legion of Doom at In Your House 16 Canadian Stampede. As you may have already worked out, Canadian Stampede was titled such because it took place in Canada. But not just anywhere in Canada, Calgary, Alberta, home of the Harts. Bret Hart, Owen Hart, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, Brian Pillhart and the British Bullhart were booked in the show's main event against an all-American dream team consisting of Ken Shamrock, Goldust, Road Warriors Hawk and Animal, and Bret's mortal enemy, Stone Cold Steve Austin. This was gonna be good. Even though they were booked as hated heels in the States, the Canadian fans went bonkers for their native sons and their buddies guy, cheering so hard that the hard cam was visibly shaking during portions of this 10-man tag. The wrestling itself was good, but not all that amazing, truth be told, but it really didn't need to be. This was all about character and story, and there was plenty of that on display as interference from all 75 Hart brothers allowed Owen to roll Austin up and give the crowd what they wanted to see. The last truly great time for one of professional wrestling's greatest families. Number 3, the British Bulldog vs. Owen Hart on Raw. 1997 saw the birth of a brand new title in the Fed as the European Championship burst onto the scene. A tournament was created to crown its first owner, which drew to a close on the March 3rd edition of Raw. The finalists were Owen Hart and the British Bulldog, who weren't just brother-in-laws but also co-tag team champions, and to top it all off, they were in the same book club. Awkward. The match, taped in Berlin, Germany for that genuine European feel, was so beautiful it would have made Bobby Eaton jealous, a rare technical masterclass for the era. Davey and Owen pulled out all the stops to christen the new title, with Bulldog leaving Germany as the winner, which you could have probably predicted considering he was actually from Europe. Anyway, a match of this quality gave the new belt the best start it could have possibly hoped for. Number 2, Shawn Michaels vs. The Undertaker at Bad Blood in Your House. All the drama from the end of SummerSlam eventually led to The Undertaker taking on the man who cost him his world title at Bad Blood in Your House. The rivalry between these two had gotten so out of control that the company needed to create a brand new stipulation to keep them in check. A gigantic cage made of the hardest, most unforgiving metal imaginable that not only swallowed up the ring, but the area around it too. This was the genesis of Hell in a Cell. The first ever cell match has gone down in history, and and for good reason. Michaels selling the fear of being trapped inside this steel asylum with a murderous mortician helped establish the structure's reputation right from the get-go, as Taker chased his prey every which way he could. It looked like the dead man was going to win the thing, when suddenly he got a blast from the past in the form of his big red brother. That's gotta be Kane making his debut, right? The debuting demon inadvertently aided Michaels in winning the bout, rounding out a match that is still considered amongst the best in the Cell's long and bloody history. Number 1, Bret Hart vs Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 13. Bret Hart and Steve Austin had a million different reasons to hate each other by the time WrestleMania 13 rolled around, so it was time to settle the score once and for all. A no DQ submission match was made between the two, with special guest referee Ken Shamrock in charge, and would you look at those shorts? Take notice, Michaels. With hatred for one another gushing from every pore, Austin and Hart went to increasingly vile lengths to put the other away. Hart smacked Austin with the bell, Austin chased the Hitman into the crowd, and of course there was the ending, perhaps the greatest closing spot of any WWE match ever. Hart managed to lock Austin in the sharpshooter, but the rattlesnake refused to give up. With blood streaming down his face, the bionic redneck chose to pass out from the pain rather than give Bret the satisfaction, a move that solidified him as a megastar and pushed Hart even further down his dark path. The word classic gets thrown around a lot in wrestling, but this match, one that was instrumental in creating one of the biggest wrestling superstars of all time, has earned that title 100 times over.